For more on this story, we have reached Kamran Bokhari. He is the founding director of the Center for Global Policy. He's also the non-resident scholar at the Arabia Foundation, and we've reached him today in Washington. So Kamran, welcome to the show. Let's begin by talking about this latest escalation in tensions between Iran and basically everyone else, the seizing of these two vessels, and now the British operator of one of the vessels says they can't get in touch with the people on board. They've lost control. What do you think when you hear these details?
I think it's just posturing on the part of the Iranians. I mean, this has been going on for a while now, and this is not the only activity. You will recall that the Iranians shot down an American drone, and then there were claims by the Trump administration that the Iranians denied that their drone was shot down. There's a lot of rocket activity coming out of Yemen into Saudi Arabia, again sponsored by the Iranians. This is Iran trying to maximize its leverage in the bargaining that it has to take place between the United States and Iran. I mean, we had President Trump a couple of days ago say there has been progress in, what I've been arguing are the back channels between the Iranians and the Americans. We've had the Iranian foreign minister yesterday say in an interview with Bloomberg that they are calculating, they being the Iranians, that there is a more than 50% chance that President Trump will get reelected for a second term. So they're prepping for negotiations. So I don't see this as leading to war. Of course, there's always the possibility of miscalculation, but I think that both sides are posturing and trying to get to the negotiating table.
So, but how far will Iran push this? If this is posturing to get to the table, to get back at talking about the nuclear deal and potentially lifting sanctions against Tehran, then how far are they willing to hedge their bets on this sort of aggressive movement?
I think their calculus is that the Americans don't want conflict. The Americans want to negotiate. This has been made amply clear by President Trump, Secretary Pompeo, and National Security Advisor John Bolton on multiple occasions. So I think the Iranians are saying, look, they don't want war, and therefore we can drag our feet for a little bit more. Because at the end of the day, I think that the Iranians, when they come to the table, they don't want to look like they've caved in. And so this is all being done in order to essentially do away with that perception that the Iranians then folded their cards.
So then are the British really a non-factor in this whole story? I mean, it's their vessel that was taken earlier in the day.
Yeah, I mean, the Brits, and I mean, those who watch Iran will recall that several years ago, the Iranian military seized an a British vessel and kept a lot of soldiers or sailors as hostages for a few days, and then put them on camera and then let them go. So this is a song and dance sequence that we've seen from Iran in the past. In this case, it would not be a stretch to say that the Iranians are trying to use the Brits as a pawn in their dealings with the Americans.
What happens next? How should the international community respond?
I think that when the Iranians do an escalation on their part, then it necessarily gets the Americans to have to respond. The Americans have been measured in their response so as not to get the situation out of hand and actually lead all of these provocations towards the negotiating table. I think that we'll see another round of sanctions. That's kind of what I think President Trump is hinting at when he says that he'll make it more tough for the Iranians. I think the Americans have the sanctions card, and the Iranians have these provocations in the Persian Gulf as its card. And at some point, they're going to say, hey, we've reached a point where further provocations lead to conflict, which both sides want to avoid. And the only way out is to say, OK, we're going to start talks, and then we're going to move away from the back channels, hopefully, into a more formal, official level conversation.
So what do you anticipate in the days ahead? Are we going to see more aggression until those conversations take place, or will someone have to push back against Iran before they get back to the negotiating table?
I think it'll be both. I'll see more of this kind of posturing. Definitely when one side does something, then the other side feels that they need to respond. That does increase the risk of miscalculation. But I think that both sides are very clear. There's no interest in a conflict And I'm pretty sure that at one point we'll reach an equilibrium state where neither side sees any further interest or decreasing marginal utility from provocations. And I think that's when we'll see a move towards a formal conversation.
Okay, Kamran, we'll leave it there for tonight, but thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Kamran Bokhari is the founding director of the Center for Global Policy. We reached him this evening in Washington.